Thanks for checking out today's episode of The Experience Curve, where we explore the personal journeys of accomplished individuals, breaking down the steps they took to get where they are, which I hope just might inspire you on your own path forward. Today, I'm joined by Samantha Pope of Samantha Pope Interiors in London, England. Now, Samantha's not just an interior designer, she's a visionary, a trendsetter, and a trusted voice shaping the very essence of luxury living with nearly 2 decades of expertise and a portfolio that speaks volumes. We uncover the remarkable path she's forged from working her way up to branching out on her own and finding her first clients. And along the way, we'll explore how a typical project is meticulously crafted from inception to completion, offering invaluable insights into the complexities of interior design. We'll also explore the learning curves and the challenges she faced when starting her business, providing practical advice for aspiring interior designers looking to make their mark in the industry. With dedication to sustainability, timelessness, and elegance that resonates throughout each project, we get into the essence of what makes Samantha Pope a true icon of interior design. Hey, Samantha, good evening to you. I know you are in the UK and I'm here in the States. So thanks for your time. I know it's your evening, so I do appreciate you taking this time out of your day and evening to talk to me on the podcast today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the invite to be a guest on your podcast.
Yeah, and for you, like we obviously came across each other online. We're able to connect through a site here that again is sort of for creators and podcasters and things like that. So it was very cool to read your story, and I'm always interested, like in someone who's got built a cool business, and you have so many years in this interior design space. And I typically start in the beginning with people, like influences or moments in your life that, said, okay, like I know interior design's for me, or is it something that maybe a mentor, a friend or family member had sort of, showed you and kind of guided you towards?
On reflection, it's only sort of when you actually look back and you try to think, what was my actual inspiration? For as long as I can remember, from the age of about 12, I knew that I wanted to do interior design. And I've sort of been racking my brains. It's like, what was the inspiration behind that? And actually, I think there's two sort of key points that I think were my triggers. Now, growing up, I shared a bedroom with my older sister. She was 9 years older than me. So the bedroom was very much, her bedroom. It was decorated how she wanted it. And then when she moved out, I was actually about 12 years old when she moved, and suddenly I had the bedroom all to myself. So my mum said to me, okay, this is your bedroom now. What do you want to do? And I said, please, can I redecorate? So my mum, she saved up her money so that I could do this. And my parents, they got by. Times were hard, so my mum really saved up for me to do this, and I really appreciated that. And I took so much pride in decorating my bedroom, and I really looked after it. So I think that was a trigger for me in sort of realizing my creativity. I just loved this bedroom, and actually my parents still live in that house, and although it's been painted a number of times, there's still things that I implemented like 28 years ago that are still there. And then secondly, my father was an upholsterer by trade, and he taught upholstery here in London at the London College of Furniture. It's no longer there. A developer's since built properties on that. But I mean, back in the day, I used to really enjoy going to work with my dad, and I used to just enjoy being surrounded by all the furniture. And I remember there was this one man that used to sit at the really big, the big A1 drawing boards. everyone draws on CAD these days, but the big A1 drawing boards where you sit and you do all your drawings. And from a young age, I was obsessed. Like, I just thought, God, you've made it. If you've got one of these, you've made it as a designer. Yeah, so that was like something I really looked up to. I just loved, I was surrounded by furniture and furniture designs at my father's work. And then it must be a combination of the two, I think, that pushed me down the interior design route.
That's cool. Yeah, because parents, a lot of times people will say, "Okay, my parents were very instrumental in doing this," and sometimes parents are, your mom or your father, your dad may have a business that they expect you to take over. And I think a lot of people are like, I don't know, if that's really for me. But sometimes it's like, okay, it's like the family tradition, so you stay into it. But it sounded like yours kind of guided you, but supported what your dreams were, and that's very cool because I think that's a good balance. It's not like they told you what not to do or what exactly to do, but they were very supportive in, sort of they were hands on but hands off, so it kind of a
They
good
were.
balance, I think.
Yeah, they really were. And actually, my dad especially, his parents pushed him into a career. So because his father done upholstery, he had to follow suit. And he never actually enjoyed doing that job, but he enjoyed teaching that. So once he went into teaching upholstery, that's what he loved. My dad's very nurturing character. So throughout my life, the attitude that my parents had were, can't was a word that I wasn't allowed to use. Yeah, that doesn't exist in our dictionary. If I was caught saying I can't, they would correct me because they didn't like me saying that. They always said, do what you want to do. They would be happy, whatever I choose to do as long as I'm happy. So I think that's the most important thing.
Oh, I agree. So taking that, where do you go from there? Is it like college, or what's the next step for you in terms of like, okay, now I kind of know what I want to do. What are the next steps you take? Because obviously, we'll get to the fact that you have your own firm, but leading up to that, what were the sort of steps you took to find your way to that path?
Yes. So after I finished school, I went to university to study interior architecture. So that was a good 5 years at uni. And I was lucky enough at university. My third year was a placement year. So we had to get work experience in a company. And I actually chose to do it in an architectural company at the time because I wanted to know more about the bones of the building and really understand the nuts and bolts of how it's put together. So I started working at an architectural company. That was actually my fourth year at uni. And then when I went back to do my final year, I stayed at that company part time. And then when I left university, I already had 2 years experience on my CV as a newly qualified, designer. But then I went back to that company for another 2 years. So I'd already gained experience, which I think helped. And from that company, I then moved to an interior design company and just worked my way up. By the age of 25, I was running a design team, running multiple projects. And yeah, I just was pushing myself all the time, just wanted to keep just doing better.
Yeah, so you're working your way sort of up. That's a relatively young age, right? At 25 to have such a responsibility, and also showing you personally that, okay, what I'm doing is clearly what I'm good at. It's paying off. It's showing that people trust in me to lead others, right? And have more responsibility. Again, I feel is a very young age. So you stay there for a good amount of time. And what's sort of like the realization that said, like, you know what, this is great to work for other people, but like maybe I can just work for myself.
Yeah, for me, it was a really gradual process because I had a lot of barriers. I knew there were certain things that didn't sit right with me. So I worked at another design company for a short period, but I had to leave that company purely because the environment was very toxic. And actually, if you rewind, this is probably going back 15, 16 years ago, a lot of the design industry was actually quite a toxic and competitive industry. And I I loved the work immensely. I thoroughly enjoyed the work, but I just didn't like the environment that I was working in. And it did affect me. And that horrible feeling on a Sunday when you know that you've got to go to work the next day, that anxiety that you end up, and things like that weren't sitting with me. I knew I was good at what I do, but I just wasn't willing to participate in the BS
Sure.
associated within the actual firm itself. So I moved from that company, and then I actually went back to the previous design company that I worked for that I was very happy with. But that was probably realization that, right, things can be done better. Like I I really believe that if you have a happy working environment, you get the best out of your people. And working at this place, it was very different to that. It was like you worked through fear, really. It was like if you turned up on time and you left on time, you would get a disciplinary. You expected to turn up an hour before your shift and leave. If you left, probably on average, I was leaving 3 hours after my shift. So they expected your life to be your work. And I just knew that life was more than that. So the it was a long time after that I actually went off my own, because a few years later I ended up having children. So I had a little bit of time out when my children were young. But my husband's actually a property developer. So I had the opportunity to do interior design through his company. So while my children were young, he offered interior design services through his company. So while they were young, that was great. I was working part-time, it was keeping me busy, keeping that creative flow. And then as my children got older, I took on more days. So it's actually only recently, in the last 4 to 5 years, that I started to think, actually, I want to make this a bigger thing. I can go bigger with this. And I wanted to create sort of an environment that was positive, that my staff are happy and proactive because of that, and happy, just happy staff, happy work. I just, that was it. But it was a gradual thing, and I had to get over a lot of mental barriers, fear and all sorts.
Oh, yeah, and the fear, I think, is what a lot of people are, kind of holds them back in the beginning, or for even starting their own company. I mean, the theme I'm catching from you is, from your parents to your husband, you have a very supportive family structure and foundation, which I think is good that a lot of people, may not have, and being able to, count on that, I think is very positive and helpful in terms of like, okay, do I need to make this? What should I do? How should I, you have a lot of sounding boards and people that you can kind of, rely on in that degree. And then, your husband obviously having that background developing is obviously a huge thing too, right? I can imagine. But you mentioned fears, like what kind of fears, for people listening, people listening want to start their own business, right? What did you sort of have to overcome to start your own business?
So my issues were to do with the fact that I didn't really have a role model that I could look up to from my designing at these previous design companies. I never really had a role model that was a mum and a businesswoman, or a successful career person and a mum. And I couldn't see. I thought at the time you had to be one or the other. And then when I become a mum, obviously that is like my greatest achievement. And I had this, it held me back for quite a long time, because I just felt like I had this desire to be more on the creative side of me, but I felt like I had to jeopardize being the mum I wanted to be. And it was a number of years of working on my mindset, really working on that helped me sort of get through that. The last 10 years, I feel like there's been a big shift in our industry. I feel like more designers are emerging that are showing, especially through social media, Instagram, they're showing more, they can be a mum and an interior designer, they can build a career around their family. And I think that actually helped me through my journey of, I had to get over my fear, and now I'm there. I've got to that stage where I don't want fear holding me back anymore. So if I feel the fear, I get excited now because I feel like, right, so that's something that challenges me. So I enjoy a challenge now. To let's go for it. And once you've gone through that challenge, that sort of rewarding feeling after, you realize, yes, like this is nothing can hold you back once you get past that, I think.
Yeah, I mean, having the role models or lack thereof, right, in your area of or your industry at the time, that has to be tough, because I think a lot of people can find that mentor, or again, just seeing people at work that you say, okay, I may not know this person, but I can see they're thriving in a situation that's very similar to mine, and to not have that for you has to be, or had to be, pretty, challenging, obviously, to think, okay, where do I go? What's my worth? Can I even do this? Is there a path for someone that has the drive like me, but also equally enjoys being a mother, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I've now carved this career that's actually worked around my family. I can still drop my kids to school. I'm sort of clinging on to that a bit at the moment because my daughter, my youngest, she's going to secondary school in September this year. So I'm clinging on to these last few months of actually being able to take her to school because she's going to be walking to school soon. It's been a gradual process of me doing it part-time and then just taking on more days, and now it's full-time, normal working hours. It was between school hours only, and now it's a full-time thing, and I'm really pleased that I've done it gradually. But then there's that part of me that thinks, oh, but I could have, if I didn't have that fear holding me back, maybe I could have done it sooner. But there's no point in looking back at that.
Yeah. I mean, speaking for myself too, I think a lot of times you do think, oh, what if I did this differently? But at the same time, you seem like me where it's more important to have had the time with your family, your kids, than it would to, in retrospect, when you're looking back when you're 100 or whatever, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
probably look back and be like, well, I'm glad I had the time with my kids. That's me. May not, you know what I mean? May not be for everyone, but, it'll all work out. But again, I think you'll look back at that time and be like, well, I'm glad I did it this way in retrospect, because that's bond with my now, adult children at the time, right? When you're
yeah,
older,
yeah,
um, be that more rewarding.
yeah, absolutely. So, I was able to do what I felt I needed to do as a mum and be there for them. And even now, having my own business, a couple of weeks ago, both my children weren't well. So, I can choose my hours. Okay, I didn't go to work that day. I looked after the children, took them to the doctors. Whereas actually, if I worked for somebody else, another company, you think, oh my God, how would I have dealt with that situation? Would I have got a disciplinary? Did I, if your children aren't well, like frequently, and you're having to take days off of work, now I have that freedom. So it suits me. I wouldn't want to work for somebody else.
Well, especially the position you mentioned earlier, when you're like, okay, staying 3 hours late, arriving early, again, how would you even you'd miss on a lot of stuff from, like you said, football matches to, right? Like whatever it might be, because some of these companies are so demanding to people. So having your own business obviously can, be beneficial in many ways, but obviously this is one example.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes, I do have to work some evenings, but that's okay because I can work from home as well. So I work from my laptop. I'm still able to have dinner with my family, put my kids to bed, and then do a few extra hours in the evening if I need to. So it works fine for me.
Oh, 100% agree. I mean, but how about like when you're deciding to branch off, right? When you're kind of like contemplating, okay, I know I'm in this interior design space. Are you thinking like maybe there's like a gap in the market or a need in the market your firm can sort of address or answer? Or are you just kind of saying like, I know I'm good at this type of, work. I'm going to just go all in on this and offer those type of services?
Yeah, so I knew that having all of my experience in the luxury residential sector, I knew that that was the sector that I wanted to continue doing because I loved it. For me, it was more about really going deep within myself and understanding what are my values, my core values when it comes to design and what's important to me. I carved out 3 core values that I wanted to be the basis of every design project that I take on. So one being well-being in interior design, because not many, I mean, I don't think people realize enough just how much your interiors in your home can affect your personal well-being. It can set you up for failure or success. It really can have an impact on your life. The second one is timelessness. So it's sort of, my clients are spending a lot of money on their homes, so you don't want them to have to redecorate every 3 years, so it's about implementing a design that lasts, and also an element of sustainability. So I often do a lot of bespoke furniture designs for my clients. So when I'm doing that, I like to think that these are the antiques of the future, so designing something that really does stand the test of time. And then thirdly, the last one is understated elegance. So I'm a bit more of a minimalist when it comes to design. I'm not so much maximalist with all of my accessories. So I needed to stay true to that. My designs may differ in terms of look, but I prefer the pared back look. So it's not going to be overly glitzy and shiny, understated is better. So those were the 3 core values that I realized were going to be the basis of moving my business forward.
Well, that's huge. I mean, to have that identified in the beginning, I think a lot of people are like, oh, I know what I want to do. I know the type of business I want to have. But to be able to break it down into, 3 values that you're like, okay, this is what we apply to every project. And it's just like, that's it. It's like kind of non negotiable. And it's, obviously a very smart thing to do. And it kind of keeps you, on like to a level that people come to you and they know what they can expect, no matter if it's, 1 year or 10 years from now, 15 years from now, like this is what we get working with Samantha, right?
Yeah. And, in the past, working for other design companies, you often have to take on their look. So you're designing, although be it amazing interiors, but it's not often what you would choose to do yourself. So it was
Yeah.
important to me that I really understand what my, core value system was.
Oh, for sure. And what about like competition? Sometimes people will look at, okay, what are people in this same kind of luxury end space doing? Did you take that into account, or were you at that point saying like, look, I've been in this enough, I know what I'm doing, I stand behind my work, and I'm not really concerned about the competition that's out there?
No, it's such a big industry that actually, when you compare designers, their style is so different. So I really believe that there is enough for everyone, you know.
No, no, no. I mean, some people don't look at it. Some people look and they just say, you know what? Like you're saying, you know what? There's enough for everyone. I don't really,
Yeah,
I kind of like I support my competitors. There's that philosophy too. There's nothing
yeah.
wrong with either. I was just wondering, when you're building the company, is it like, do you look at, okay, these people are taking on this much a year versus what I can do, and then their stuff is more of this, or is it like, hey, you know what? I'm just doing me, and not really, distracted by what other people are doing.
If anything, if I do take anything from other companies, because I listen to a lot of podcasts and I listen to a lot of interior design podcasts that are actually based in the US, and I I try to take more business information from that. So, you know, first and foremost, I am a designer, so I've had to learn, and I'm still learning the business side. So it's those, you know, sides of the business in terms of how, you know, systems that other designers may have in place. And I like listening to any advice other designers would give, you know, because I think, oh yes, I'll remember that for next time. Or I've actually changed my terms and conditions, because I've heard another designer say, oh, I've added this because I've had this experience with a client. And I thought, yeah, that's a good idea. I'll add that to my T's and C's. So it's things like that that I have taken. But in terms of the design, I just feel like there's enough for everyone. We've all got our own unique touch. So, you know, you come to me if you like what I do.
Totally. And well, what about that? Like, what about the first time you're out, you start your own business and you're like, okay, I have to find clients, right? Like, are you already sort of, you have some core clients that when you start, you're already rolling, or is it now you have to go out and sort of build a book of business that a fresh, clients that you've never met before?
Yeah, that bit was hard. In all honesty, the networking was the hardest thing for me. I've got used to it now, and I've started to enjoy it now. But I was quite lucky that when I was still working under my husband's umbrella, going back a few years, I actually had a previous client of mine from when I worked at another design company. They approached me. They actually we lost contact when I left the design firm, and it was about 9 years later, no, 7 years later, something like that. And this client managed to get their daughter to find me on Facebook. Then they managed to find my contact number. They've called me and they said, Samantha, we need you to design our new house, just like the last house. And now I was like, wow, that was such an amazing feeling of that, just achievement that, you know, that they've gone out of their way. He had to get his daughter because when I designed their house previously, this was pre-marriage, you know, my surname was different. So now I'm married with
Sure.
children, now working under my husband's brand. And so they had to really find me. They found me through Facebook for using my previous surname, my maiden name. So that was really lovely. So that was a bit of a stepping stone and realization that actually I could go off and sort of branch off on my own. I needed my own brand separate to my husband's. But then when I did actually go off on my own, it was realizing that I had to go out there and actually network more and just connect with more people and just, you know, let people know who I am. And so, yeah, that it was challenging though. It's not easy.
Yeah, it's not easy, when you're finally like, okay, I'm doing my own thing, and I need to get out there and start meeting. And where do you go? Who do you? What's worth your time? What's a waste of time? All these things you sort of have to find out by doing them. I think because you'll look online, you'll see, oh, this conference is go, and then you go and you're like, okay, that was a waste of time and money, and I could have used those funds to do this or do that, right?
Yeah. And there's been many of those. There's been many.
How about like, you mentioned brand identity and kind of breaking, from what you were doing with your husband. How did you develop like Samantha Pope and your brand identity, and how's that sort of evolved since you've started?
Yeah. So yeah, I needed to separate my brands. It got to a point where I was I was getting busier, and I realized that the target market that I wanted to focus on, obviously being the luxury end, being under my husband's brand, I wasn't quite getting those inquiries come through. I think it was a little bit mixed signals. So it was important that I actually separated my brand. And my brand was really based around my core values again, sort of understated, elegance. I also had this idea that I wanted my logo to be almost like I'm signing, like my initials. So I teamed up with a calligraphy artist. So she kind of created this SP sort of signature, which is my logo.
Yeah. So basically working with someone that was more of a branding person, or was it sort of like friends, family,
Yeah, so I did actually. Yeah, at the time, I worked with a web and branding designer, and then separately had my calligraphy artist come up with this logo, and then he implemented it into sort of the overall branding and created my first website. I've since had a second website done. Yeah, so I do, and I have a team now that kind of keep keep that sort of managed behind the scenes. So any updates that I need, changes that I want along the way, they'll get them done for me.
Yeah, it's tough too because you have to keep up with the branding, and like you said, you had a client that found you on Facebook, and right, and kind of like hunted you down, right? But then you also mentioned in the beginning you saw a lot of people coming onto Instagram and other platforms that like said, okay, like I can see the sort of work life balance, the have the family but have the career at the same time. So social media obviously plays right a big part of that as well, and in terms of like your core brand and your core brand assets and logo and kind of stuff. But then the social presence, which obviously is huge as well.
Yeah, so Instagram is my main platform. So that's the main one for our industry, just more visual.
It's totally more visuals. And do you feel like utilizing that helps you showcase sort of like better than your personal site because you're able to tap into people that are already there? Or do you feel like you have to keep up your personal website just as much because the traffic is pretty strong as well?
Yeah, I feel Instagram is quite important for me. I'm not an expert in Instagram. I've not got, massive amounts of following either. But, you know, it's actually a full-time job just keeping up on the social media posting. So I just do it as and when I can. But stories is what I prefer to do just because I can do more behind the scenes stuff on stories. I like to keep the actual Instagram grid a bit more sort of pretty photos, and I'll only show my own work as well. I'm not going to share anybody else's work. If I do share, it will be on a story and it will just be me commenting, how much I love this person's work. But on my grid, it's only my work. And then that's also challenging as well because the last couple of years I've had projects that are all in design and construction stage. So I've not had finished photos to actually post. So I've got that a lot coming up. But it's sort of how do you then create content without enough of these photos? You don't want to have to keep repeating content. So stories has been more my thing, and I can do more behind the scenes content on that. I think that works for me.
Yeah, it's social media can be like your entire day if that's where you want to make the time commitment to. But if people they need to run their business, right? So with the social, it's good to have, but it could be so time consuming for people. But if you can pick up clients and showcase your work, it's that fine line where you have to sort of do both, right? Someone listening, right? They say, okay, interior design, you're doing this sort of sustainable, timeless concepts that you put together. But how about just the basics of like your business? How does like project management, right? Like the clients like when someone comes to you from start to finish. I mean, like in an abbreviated way, I guess. Like, how does that whole process kind of play out from the phone call you get to like someone, the happy customer?
Okay. So any new design inquiry, I will direct them to my website because I have an online inquiry form. So that has a number of questions on there that I ask them to complete. It just provides enough information that I can then check through that and actually see if it's a project that I think is suitable for myself and the client, the potential client. From there, I would then arrange a Zoom call or a site meeting if it's local, and then I would price the project. So based on a really sort of brief outline of the project, I would give them a design fee for the works. Once they've agreed to proceed and contracts are signed, we go through the whole design process, which starts from analysing the brief, Then we move on to concept design. So that is basically producing really initial concepts to show the design direction. It may not be the end vision, but it's actually showing you where the design is going. After that, we go on to design development. So we start building up the design, looking at the budget, getting costs in, really pinning down the end figure. And then after that, we'll prepare drawings for tender or construction. Then it will go through the construction phase, and we will make various site visits to check on progress of key design items such as kitchen, flooring, tiling. We're there to make sure any design details are needed to be discussed on site. And then that goes right the way through, and we finish with the full furniture installation and handover to the client.
I think like you mentioned, the shows that you see in the US, like it all seems like a very exciting, right? Like, well, I mean, they show you the sides of people that get stressed when they're doing these things and the right, but it does seem like a very exciting business to be in. I'm assuming it's for you. It's rewarding, of course. It's what you love, but it's also rewarding to see the finished product and the look on people's faces.
It is, and especially when we've had so many happy tears when we're revealing the end product, and it's so lovely, it's so rewarding, and I'm able to create a space for my clients that they completely adore.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about the client being happy, right, at the end, because you want them to refer you and right and come back to you in the future when they want to, hopefully they don't, if you're right doing something that's going to be stand the test of time, right, with your designs. But like of these like 2 decades you've been doing this, like are there principles or styles like that you implement that you feel that they truly do stand the test of time?
I think the main thing is just don't follow trends.
Yes, yes.
Every year there's a new trend, and if you follow the trends, then next year it's going to go out of fashion. It's just, don't just forget about trends. Just, what's important to me is that I understand what the client needs, and we often have to read between the lines because I like to, when I'm doing a client briefing, I ask them more about how do they want to feel in this space. What is the space being used for, and how do you need to feel in that space? Does it need to be an energetic space or a calming space? So things like that. They might say to me, oh, I want this, but actually they only want that because they've seen that on TV or their friends got that. And I can say to them, well, you said you want this, but actually, because you've told me that you need this space to be a really calming, environment for you, that I think this would be the better option for you. So it's kind of like reading between the lines, that they might say something that, you kind of, there's more to it. And often we're counsellors, to be honest.
That's true. And how about like okay, so you've been putting in the work, you've been in this business, a good time. Obviously you've done, great work. You're also, you've judged award shows. You've been a magazine contributor, right? So you're getting recognition beyond just, clients coming to you and saying, "Hey, we love what you've done," or "Here's a referral," right? So like what does that do for you and your business, like in terms of, obviously, being recognized has to be, flattering to be like, okay, they've asked me to participate in whatever, again, award shows, magazines. Like, what is that, in terms of you for PR, and how has that sort of changed things in your life?
Yeah, so last year I was so shocked actually when they approached me to be a judge, and I was like, yes, of course I will. Yeah, I was just so privileged to be asked, and I really enjoyed the judging day, when we all got together and we had to discuss the designs that were put forward. And it It came at the right time for me, to be honest, because last year when they approached me, last year was the toughest year of my life. On a personal level, we were dealing with grief behind the scenes. So that I found really did affect me sort of in terms of focus for a period, but also I felt like it kind of affected my confidence for a bit. So when they approached me to be a judge, and then also being an contributor in the Brains magazine, I was like, oh, it was that recognition that I kind of needed at the time because I was going through other stuff. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Yeah.
I can imagine, right? Like, you're putting in all the time and the hard work and, like you said, coming in early, leaving, time away from family and then, making that change in your life. And years later, it's like, okay, other people are starting to obviously see that I made the right, you made the right choice and as also being reflected in, right, people asking you to do cool things like this. So like, in hindsight, like, what do you believe, like, the key factors that made, starting your business, like, the right choice?
I think, it's not for everyone. You really need to understand the reasons why you're doing it. Some people, it is better for them to go and work for another company. But for me, it was more about getting that balance in life. And it's hard work. I'm not going to lie. It is hard work to run a business. And there's a lot of ups and there's a lot of downs. And the downs are really down and the ups are really up. It's challenging. And, you have to put the work in. I had to learn an enormous amount when it comes to business, cash flow. None of this was, I never learned any of this. I've had to kind of learn this as I go along, but I've been committed to it, and now I actually enjoy a lot of that business side because I'm really understanding why things are now moving forward so well is because I've really got to grips with, I've got the reins. You need to be committed to really understanding how to run a business before you do it. You can't just do it, as a lot of designers, are designers and not business people. So you really need to do your research before you go into it.
Yeah, it's true. You're right. Being an entrepreneur, being a business owner, the trade or the skill that you're trying to, right, turn into a business. But then you're like, wait a minute, I'm not an accountant. I'm not, all these a branding, a logo designer, a website SEO expert. All these things that you kind of take on that you don't really realize in the beginning. You think, oh, I just do this. I think I can do a business doing that, and then you slowly learn, or quickly, that's not the case, so like, for people who are listening that maybe they're aspiring designers, like, what kind of advice would you give them? Obviously, it's not easy, and whether you want to have your own business or work for others is going to be different, but in terms of like the landscape of design and even technologies that kind of come along with that, what kind of advice would you give those aspiring designers?
Yeah, I would always advise that they get a qualification. So I'm not sure what it's like over in the US, but here we've got a lot more choice now. You can go to uni or you can do a part-time course. Like there's a lot more freedom, and you can, especially if you're more of a mature student, there's a lot more options out there for you to study part-time. So definitely get the qualification, but also get some experience. You need to be able to understand how the design environment works, because what I learned at university, I mean, it may have changed now because that was a long time ago, but I don't, I mean, I learned how to do the drawing side, and, I learned a lot, but I learned most of what I know now through working for other companies. Things like AutoCAD, sort of. I think there's Vectorworks, AutoCAD, SketchUp. It's handy to get familiar with those systems, and obviously trying to understand a bit of AI now. That's an emerging thing. So it's something I'm trying to get my head around and
We all are.
understand how I could maybe implement.
Yes,
So
yes, we
yeah,
are.
I'm just trying to do a bit of research and trying to understand how I could potentially implement it within my company and use it. Yeah. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, the education's huge, but like you said, the hands-on experience in real life situations with real life clients and real life deadlines and all those kind of good things that go behind it are where you really get that experience that, will sort of, keep your career, you'll always be able to draw back to that is I'm more trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah. And you learn things more, people skills, and going to site, you really understand more. You learn more when you're on site and physically seeing everything put together. Yeah, so definitely get as much experience as you can.
And how about people, I know you're UK based, right? But for people who want to, connect with you on Instagram, your website, but where's the best place for people to find you?
Probably Instagram. So if they look up Samantha Pope Interiors, they'll find me there, or they can go on my website, which is samanthapope.com.
Very cool. Yeah. I mean, I follow you on Instagram and I suggest everyone else does. And, I appreciate your time today, breaking down everything from, your background to how you kind of found your way into this space, but are obviously doing amazing stuff and just really just getting into the mechanics of how you built your business and everything that kind of goes behind it and the great advice you, had for people listening and just everything you kind of broke down for us today. So thank you so much for, taking the time out of your evening. And I really did enjoy this talk with you.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And I hope, whatever I've said today can help somebody emerging.
That's what it's all about. And I think you did. So thank you again, Samantha, and everyone, check out Samantha on Instagram and, have a great evening. And thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to this episode of Experience Curve. Please take the time to share this podcast with a friend or colleague to help get the word out about my show.